Okie doke. Hammer Article 1. Why align to the grid? Well, you're going to be paranoid after this tutorial. Took me a little bit to set everything up. But here we have a box that is aligned to the grid. Simple box, one brush, 6 sides, cube. Same texture on every side, and same scale, same shift. Everything is all lined up because it is all lined up with the grid. I press the fit button, which you don't want to do on everything, and it turns out everything's still 125 because I have a brush that is 128 units wide, and the texture is 128 pixels wide, etc., etc. So right here I have a brush that is aligned to the grid and simple. Right here I have that same brush, except it has been rotated and it is no longer aligned to the grid, not even in the smallest way. The grid can only go so small, and you want to stay within the grid. Because of that, I've pressed the fit button, and it has decided that the texture scale is no longer the same on every side. However, if you click on every side, it always says 25, 25, 25, 25. So I would assume that means it can detect that one of these faces has a texture scale that is not 25. It's just a little bit off. It can detect the difference, but it can't see it. So it just says there's a difference here, and when you go to look at them, they all say 25. That's this brush beginning to hiccup. I'm going to show you what this looks like to the computer. Now, our brush that has not been rotated in any way looks like this to the computer. It says, here's a brush. It's got a side, and here are the coordinates. It's got this material, and here's the scale of this material, as well as, the position, which is the shift, and the rotation, and the light map scale, and the smooth groups, which I really don't use that often. That's the normal brush. It hasn't been rotated or anything. It's all aligned to the grid, so all the coordinates are nice and happy with the grid. And because the brush is aligned to the grid, the textures are easier. They're aligned to the grid. Here is the rotated brush. You can see that for every point on these planes, it now has a whole bunch more extra numbers because it's not aligned to the grid. It is 72.9368 units, which is not good because now you've got 4 extra variables for every coordinate, 3 coordinates for every plane. No, three numbers for every coordinate, 3 coordinates for every plane, 6 planes for every cube. So you're dealing with a whole bunch of extra numbers just in the coordinates for the vertex points. Now, the brush no longer being aligned to the grid also affects your texture, because now it says the texture, in order to fit onto the brush, the same as it has for the brush that is aligned to the grid, it now has to be 0.7986 blah 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 in order to be at the right spot. And the brushes are aligned to the textures are aligned to the that's messed up. It's supposed to say face. Oh, well, this one isn't rotated, so it's aligned to the world. Now, the brush that has been rotated, it's not sure if it's aligned to its face or not. Some parts are, some parts aren't, but none of it is aligned to the world. So it's a little bit confused there. If you tell it to align to the world, then you mess up with some odd contorted texture deal, because the textures are aligned to the world, but the brush they're on is not. So you would have to sit there and fiddle with it, and you would never get it to fit the same way as it was when it was aligned to the face. because with one you're telling it to align according to the grid, the other you're telling it to align according to the orientation and the coordinates of the brush. So that adds in a whole bunch of extra numbers with the scale, the coordinates, and the coordinates for the brush. Even in here it says the scale is 25 on everything, which is strange. Okay, moving on. Earlier I said this brush could begin to hiccup, or it has begun to hiccup. What a hiccup is, my friend and I invented this error. It's when the vertex points split apart. There's a vertex point here. It looks like one, but it's actually one for this face, one for this face, and one for this face, right here. So that is 3 vertex points. Control E will line you up with the vertex points, by the way. But what a hiccup is when the calculation in Hammer gets to the point where it can't figure it out. And in order for it to make this shape legal, in order for it to continue to exist in the world without having a problem in its lighting, it has to slightly alter it. Like right now, I've just made an illegal brush because from here to here is different from here to here. It's no longer flat. From here to here goes underneath the line from here to here. You could fix that by selecting these. See, it just buckled there, reversed. You can select these 2 dots and hit Control F, and that's supposed to fix it because now it knows this is a flat plane between 3 vertex points and this is a flat plane between 3 vertex points. That only fixed that side. It would be nearly impossible in order to get a weird shape like this to be legal in Hammer's math. But when you rotate stuff and it's not aligned to the grid, it starts to hiccup where the numbers are so small, Hammer can't keep track, and it starts to alter them. When it starts to alter them, the vertex points look more like that. Whoa. Okay, go back. Back, you beast. There it is. See, there's a bunch of vertex points on a brush that looks like this. I made this for an earlier tutorial. What happened here, this is a normal brush. All the vertex points are aligned to the grid, but the problem is that you have these tiny triangles that shoot way out on this tiny tip, and the tips have broken. Now what happens once the tips break on this brush is that the brush, when you move it and you have snap to grid on, which is Shift W, it aligns according to the grid, according to the size of the brush, which means that if there were any vertex points that were on the grid, they're now off the grid because of the hiccup, which has aligned to the grid. So now nothing's aligned to the grid, and if you copy any other brushwork with this that is aligned to the grid, and it orientates itself according to the hiccup brush, then none of the brushwork is aligned to the grid anymore, which causes your VMF to get bigger, your compile log to get longer, your rendering to get slower, and your BSP to become larger. If you're going to do like an arch, some tutorials will tell you make it so that there are only 3 vertex points on each of these triangles to save on vertex points. So you'd have one there and one there and one there. That's bad because it makes a really long, thin triangle, which begins to hiccup. What you want to do for something like that is make a line right here. Small triangle. But it adds one more vertex to this brush over here, which is fine because now you're not going to have a hiccup. And it's Func Detail anyway. If you're going to do some crazy thing that's not aligned to the grid, make sure that it is Func Detail. Otherwise, it's going to kill your compile time. That's about it. And here's a picture of a brush that has hiccuped. You can see this vertex point is for the face on the top. This one's for the one on the right there, and this one's on the front. Now those are all supposed to be in the same spot, and they're not. But it's still a valid brush for some reason. By the way, that brush, if it were the actual size, then you could never see that. What I did is I found a brush that had a hiccup in it, and then I scaled it up about 100 times bigger than it was. It doesn't even fit in the grid anymore. But now you can see where the faces are splitting apart. And that's what a hiccup looks like. Except Hammer doesn't know, because it thinks that everything's lined up because the numbers are that small.